for our Catalyst Symposium. I believe this is our third group. Is that right, Jonathan? This is our third group of proposals, of completed projects, I should say. And we're heading into accepting our round for our fourth round of proposals. So, this program has grown and kind of changed a little bit, and we keep trying to make it better as it is going on. But the purpose is to really seed efforts of the ideas that kind of bubble up for collaborations between the College of Education and the Friday Institute. And it's wonderful to see these different relationships kind of form and projects get seeded. And just so everyone in here knows, if you haven't had a Catalyst award, that we follow you for 2 years after your award. So you'll get asked, this group, you're going to get asked for 2 more years. So what have you done that has, that was seeded from that? Is there anything a publication or another grant, so that we can kind of track how effective our seeding money is actually doing as far as building capacity in research, and that is one of our goals. So I'm Holly Lindley. I should have started with that. I am the Lynn part of the Shaw-Lynn duo here, trying to lead the Friday Institute with Sean Kellogg, and in the interim. He is not able to be here, and he sends his regrets. But we are very excited to have all 3 of our funded proposals from last year be able to share with their results. We asked them to prepare a 10-minute presentation with Q&A afterwards. We'll do Q&A specific to each project right afterwards. So without further ado, we're going to go to our first project, and I'll let them introduce themselves, introduce their team members, and then get going.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I think most of the folks in the room know who I am. I'm Jennifer Houchins. I did a Catalyst project with Amato Nocera, who was unfortunately unable to be here today, as he is a brand new foster parent. So let's give a round of applause for Amato. He has 2 beautiful little girls that is now part of his family. So I agreed to give our presentation on my own so that he could deal with suddenly growing family. So we did a project on machine learning in the history classroom, using artificial intelligence for student-led inquiry into redlining. And you may be thinking, history and machine learning, how do those 2 things fit together? So we're going to talk about that and how we integrated those into a week-long unit for high school students. So those 2 things fit together really because of our team. So we have, as you can see, a large team. It wasn't just myself and Amato. So Amato and his graduate student, Vicki Newton, as you can see here, brought a history expertise and teaching history and social studies and things like that. And then we had myself and Xian Zhang and Chansu Tatar, who came from an educational technology, learning design and technology background. And Chansu and I and Xian all had the sort of data science, machine learning component of the expertise. And we brought all of that together to work with our wonderful high school teacher, whose name is Melanie Winter, you can see here, who gave us a lot of input on our materials as we were building this curricular unit for her students. There we go. So we conducted a pilot study of our curriculum in May of 2022, and this unit was based on historical inquiry into redlining. So what we wanted to do is take our educational technology and pair it with primary source investigation. So if you're unfamiliar with what a primary source is, we're going to be talking about the documents that the homeowners lending corporation agents used as descriptions of neighborhoods and how those were used to determine if a family was able to be awarded a mortgage or not. So this was a week-long curricular intervention, and we worked with high school sophomores at an urban public high school here in the area. Each lesson was 45-minute standard lesson, and this is kind of how the week went. So on day one, we gave a historical context of redlining. So we talked about when these agents were going out into neighborhoods and the kinds of descriptions they were building about the neighborhoods and what they were providing to the banks in order to determine whether or not families got mortgages. And then on day two, we did a complete 180 and went into the educational technology side of things and introduced students to the StoryQ platform, which is the platform we use to do the machine learning. And we really took that day two in order to introduce them to the platform so that we could come together on day three to use the platform to explore the primary sources. On day four, we took the platform and we went a little deeper into the machine learning side of things and took a much larger data set of primary sources and allowed students to do their own inquiry and to identify patterns in language that they thought were interesting. And then on day five, we took the time to do some reflection as a class and allow them to discuss what they thought was important about using the technology in order to do this exploration of the historical primary sources. So we're going to take a look at what the students did, and hopefully my slides will work here, and I'm going to try to drive with this behind me. But this is a website called Mapping Inequality. And so when we did the historical context portion of our curriculum, students used this website in order to look at Durham, North Carolina redlining data. So what you see here is a map of Durham in 1940. You'll see the total population then was 60,195. And these areas of color that you're seeing are neighborhoods and their grade rating based on the Homeowners Lending Corporation. So any area that's marked as red got a grade of D, which was labeled as hazardous. And so what we did, you could see there's not very many neighborhoods here, and so as students were exploring mapping inequality, they were asked to look at red neighborhoods and green neighborhoods and tell us what they identified as being the language, or what patterns they might notice, of being the language that was used to describe these neighborhoods. So if you clicked on a neighborhood, you can actually get a description of the neighborhood that the agents had submitted, that someone had so lovingly gone through and input into mapping inequality. And so they went through and they identified language. And then we took a step back. We said, okay, this is a very small number of neighborhoods. What if I looked at a city that had a much larger number of neighborhoods? So we went to Chicago. And what do you notice? The map is much smaller. And if I zoom in, you'll see, a little too far. There are much more neighborhoods to look at. So if I start looking at neighborhoods, it's going to take a lot longer for me as a human being to parse all of that language. And so that's why we went from mapping inequality, we downloaded data, and let's see if I can get let me zoom back out and try to get this slide to advance. Let's go. Yay, technology. There we go. Come on. Next slide. So we took that data and we put it into the StoryQ platform. Now here you can see all of that data. And because we went from approximately 10 or 15 neighborhoods to over 300, we started looking at that data here in StoryQ, and you can see each one of the descriptions has a label that is the grade that the neighborhood got. And of course, you know, it has the details of this A1, A2, B1, B2. Those are the neighborhood area that sort of gives us an indication of where it is in the city. And we asked students to sort of scroll through, kind of get an idea of things they might want to look for as far as patterns are concerned. And then we told them to go and explore this. So I'm not gonna, this is with the training of the model. I'm not gonna go through the training of the model just because we have a limited amount of time. But they used the software to create models of the text, and then they explored how often a particular word was associated with either an A neighborhood or a B neighborhood. And they drew their own conclusions from that. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make sure that I'm not gonna run out of time. So the insights we gained from this was that there was a unique potential for AI to be used in this way to look at historical input and help students consider structural explanations for racial inequality. So they started noticing patterns about the types of language that were used in the description of those neighborhoods that were rated as D neighborhoods or red neighborhoods, where families were less likely to get a mortgage, versus the language that was used for A neighborhoods, green neighborhoods. And I'll talk about a little bit about the patterns they noticed. A key component of our curriculum specifically, before we talk about that, was that we were continually emphasizing that the neighborhood descriptions were presented views of the agents of the Homeowners Lending Corporation, HOLC, and that those were agents who were associated with the government and were in a position of power. Okay, so that's an important distinction that the kids had to really think about as they were exploring the data. We found the students were explicitly noting the descriptions that worked in the service of creating racial segregation. So specifically, I'm talking about them noticing that D neighborhoods were often including words in their descriptions that talked about race or potentially ethnicity. So they noted that D neighborhoods usually talked about the families that were living in the neighborhood in terms of immigrant status. Were they black families? Were they homeowners? A lot of the D neighborhoods had a lot of rental properties and things with a more transient population. Whereas A neighborhoods usually included language like neatly shaped lawns, close to the university. They talked about the amenities that were available to the folks in A neighborhoods and the things that didn't mention anything about race or ethnicity. The surprising thing that we noticed is that students expressed the affordances of using the platform to do this exploration. We even had one student that actually said, I liked looking at this because we could look at more data and we didn't have to just read the texts that our teacher picked for us to read. We could explore what we thought was important, not what our teacher thought was important. So students got a sense of agency out of that. So, additional funding and future work, since we have to talk about that, and I have less than a minute. Amato has actually been awarded a seed grant for Data Science Academy. He's working with Christy Bird and Zhang on that. There is also an application for more supplemental funds from the original StoryQ grant to continue this line of work. Next year, the project is going to work explicitly with the folks who developed the Mapping Inequality site to kind of connect the curriculum more with more of the data. We had to download data from it this time, but we may be having that more integrated. And then there was an NSF I-test proposal that went in that is going to adapt the curriculum for using AI across the spectrum of additional content areas. So in addition to history, hitting math, English, science in Maryland, Massachusetts, and California. So, since I'm out of time, questions?
Thank you. So I just have a question. So when you proposed when you wrote the proposal for the,
Hold on. There's another.
so when you,
On the bottom. It's on.
it's on? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you wrote the proposal, did you have the partner with the teacher already?
Yes, yes. So we were very lucky to have the connection with the teacher prior to the proposal. She and Amato actually went to graduate school together.
Okay.
So that significantly eased efforts.
Right, right, yeah, because the proposal, I mean, the time frame for these catalysts are so short,
Yes.
so that is good to know. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Other questions?
Were the students able to then connect the historical data to some kind of current data about neighborhoods?
Yes, excellent question. So we found that students actually brought to the discussion on Friday when we did our reflection day, students had actually connected it not only to things they were reading in other courses, they were connecting it to some of their assigned readings, but we had more than one student who went out the night before the reflection day and started looking at Zillow and started looking at the descriptions of homes that were in their areas where they were living and kind of connecting. And they actually said, there's some of the same language that is still being used today in these descriptions on Zillow. They noticed, things about the amenities that were offered in the certain neighborhoods, or proximity to schools, or things like that were used in the descriptions of the neighborhoods back in 1940. So they started building that connection for themselves, and we never told them to go look at Zillow, which was amazing.
So what piece of advice would you give to somebody who is writing a proposal or getting ready to do another Catalyst project based on some of the lessons you all learned in doing such a big project in such a short time?
Think about the timing of the IRB.
Build that in.
And everybody in the room is laughing because they know how long that takes. It did take us a long time to get not only what we needed from the school, because the school was actually a charter school, very small. So getting what we needed from the leadership there and coordinating with the teacher in order to get all of our IRB materials in. And we were very, we were lucky that she was able to get us things quickly, but there were a lot of restrictions. Like, we couldn't take photos, we couldn't record anything. And the CODAP platform actually has the ability to get back-end data, but we didn't do any of that because it would have taken too long to get all of that approved. So that was the most challenging part.
Yeah.
Is just, we spent the first several months doing nothing but IRB and preparing our instruments, working with the teacher. And then we spent a couple of weekends planning the curriculum on a time that was convenient for her on a weekend to come and spend time all day with us.
Right.
And review everything.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, so we're going to
Thank you.
transition to number 2, and Jessica, I believe that is you.
Hello. Okay. Just checking to make sure that this works. Okay. Hi, I'm Jessica Hunt, for those of you that don't know me. I am here to present Changing the Tide, which dealt with supporting and retaining residency licensed special education teachers. I want to also acknowledge many of my team members. I am the only one here, but I did want to acknowledge their work and efforts in the project and say thank you to them. So before we get started, I just wanted to foreground where this work took place and what its goal was. So the National Research Council identifies 3 categories of research in sort of these interconnected phases. The descriptive phase, the process phase, and then the causation phase. So this Catalyst grant and its goal was taking place in the descriptive phase. I point that out because largely this work was really just seeking to understand what is happening. Okay. So in service of that goal, we had a couple different research questions that you see on the screen. And to address these research questions, we conceptualized this work as an exploratory case study design. That was not our original design. And that's probably because we experienced a lot of challenges in this project. So I just wanted to share a couple of those with you. One was that all but 2 of the original team members transitioned out of the FI shortly after this project started. So our team shrunk really quickly. Another issue was that some of our data collection involved the use of a survey. Well, since we had such a short amount of time to get the survey out and to collect responses, we decided to go with social media to advertise and Qualtrics to collect that data. Well, I have not done survey research for over 10 years, and the last time I did it, I was literally sending paper surveys out and getting them back in the mail. So somebody didn't think of, ooh, what might happen if a bot gets a hold of our survey? Well, it did. Yeah, it did. So we got lots of responses, over 1,000, but we could only verify 7 of them. Yeah. So our original goal was to get at least 100 responses. Well, we had 7 that we could actually verify, so that's what we worked with. And our original goal was also to get 6 people to engage with us in a focus group. We were only able to get 3. Okay, so the size of this work went really, 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 really small. So I did want to foreground that and point that out before we move forward. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the focus groups and the questionnaire instrument that we used to collect the data from the folks we did work with. So to dive into people's opinions, values, views, and experiences, we use the semi-structured focus groups. As I mentioned a moment ago, we interviewed 3 participants. This obviously constituted a convenience sample at this point. 2 of the participants were of the 7 that filled out the survey. A third one was a local contact. Each teacher attended 1 focus group within a month of completion of the questionnaire. I'll talk about transferability and dependability through the use of, an audit trail in a moment. We also had a questionnaire, or questions that composed our survey research. So for that, we used an existing questionnaire, which is the Teaching Students with Disabilities Efficacy Scale. And we did that to collect broader data related to the research questions. And as you can see, we had 24 questions on that questionnaire across 5 different constructs, as you see on the screen. Okay, so when I say case study, what does that mean and how did we analyze the data? So the graphic that you see on the screen is generally a breakdown of our analytic process. We did start with the transcripts from the focus group in terms of analysis. We generated and defined categories for analysis using a grounded theory. So generally what that means is that we used a process of open coding, which entails segmenting data into meaningful expressions and then describing them in a single word or a short sequence of words. Once we had open codes, we employed axle coding from there. And axle coding generally means is that we're using the open codes to identify phenomena, causal conditions, strategies, as well as intervening contexts. We also used a lot of strategies to ensure credibility, such as persistent observation, which for us meant that we focused in detail on particular trends throughout the focus group conversations. We also engaged in member checking as part of our analytic process. So after we had all of the focus groups analyzed, we then moved to the surveys, and from those, we just generated some descriptive statistics and combined the descriptive statistics and the focus group results into a summative interpretation. Okay, so in this section, I want to talk to you about some findings and some things that we learned from this work. We'll begin with the qualitative results and then follow with the descriptive statistics after that. So the qualitative results yielded two overarching categories, which you see on the screen: navigating the early years of special education, and then conundrums in current practice. So this graphic is showing you kind of a pictorial representation of that first category, which is navigating the early years of special education. So generally, the causal conditions for this phenomenon involved people making moves into full-time positions in special education, either from a substitute role or from external service roles. The moves were described as opportunistic in terms of making larger impacts or advancing one's career. So strategies teachers described to make this move involved varying pathways and processes, all of which were described as on-the-job skill building or learning how to use school-based instructional programs. Okay. So a clear consequence of the strategies involved teachers feeling like that they knew many programs, yet they didn't understand the pedagogical theories behind them. And they often described not really understanding their students either, which I thought was interesting. The consequences described in that first category lead really well into the second, which is conundrums in current practice. So in this category, we had two competing phenomena. This one shows the first one, which is a feeling of not feeling competent or feeling incomplete. So here, feelings of isolation was a salient feature of teachers' described daily experiences. Teachers also described at times feeling different. That word came up again and again and again. So that either meant different from the general education teachers that they were to collaborate with, or at times they used the term to describe the students they were working with, and they're not being able to understand those differences. Strategies are dependent upon the phenomenon, right? So, for example, teachers described accommodating their feelings of unpreparedness with touch points and tools such as technology to reach their students or communicate with parents and other educators. Consequences of not feeling prepared or incomplete often included assumptions that were being made about students' abilities, as well as like instructional approaches. So they knew how to use the programs, even if that didn't align with what students were bringing them in terms of their knowledge. They just wanted to use the programs to support them. On the other hand, teachers who described themselves as confident described different strategies. There were different causal conditions and consequences, such as opportunities for reflective growth and the use of resources as tools. So these teachers would describe the curriculums that they were given as tools. instead of the endpoint. They acknowledged them, but they wanted to know more. They wanted to do more. Collaboration with general education teachers was often a way that they accomplished that goal. So that was a salient feature of the folks who described themselves as a bit more confident. So did we have any connections between our focus groups and our survey results? We actually did see some connections there. So the descriptive statistics generated from the questionnaires are reported on the screen. And results generally confirm the categories uncovered by a qualitative analysis. So respondents reported feeling well qualified to enact facets of instruction that come along with most ready-made programs, like interpreting assessment data, or providing feedback statements, or using explicit instruction, things like that. However, most respondents also reported that they felt not at all or only somewhat prepared things to teach students with high incidence disabilities, such as learning disabilities, autism, and emotional behavioral disorder. Participants also reported not being familiar at all with laws and regulations like the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, or even the CEC high leverage practices. So taken together, the data in this study revealed two seemingly contradictory stories of the perceptions and experiences of residency licensed teachers. On the one hand, we have a group that reported feeling able to enact many of the practices associated with scripted curricula, but at the same time, they felt unprepared and incomplete with regard to what it meant to teach and what it meant to support students who may learn differently. On the other hand, when teachers felt connected to a learning community that often includes collaboration with general ed and families of students with disabilities, we saw another picture. So this more confident picture often had the inclusion of kids with disabilities as a described result, which I thought was really interesting. So recommendations and future work, we're obviously looking to publish this work. I use it a lot when I talk to my own program about areas that we might want to focus on more, because we will get folks coming through that have sort of those initial licenses coming through our program. And we're also talking about writing a grant to the U.S. Department of Education to fund people to come through our program who might otherwise have different experiences, so that we can better support them in these areas that they named. And that's it. Thank you.
So let's go to questions. Yes.
You mentioned at the very beginning you had bots respond to your survey. How did you know? So you talked about bots responding to your survey. How did you identify the bots from the non-bots?
Like timestamps, repetitive responses, things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you advertise the survey to get the bots?
We noticed that we seem to be getting a lot of the false responses when we put it on Twitter.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Not a question, it's more a comment. I'm not super familiar with Qualtrics, but if you ever do another Qualtrics survey, I do think there's like a bot
There is.
thing you can check.
Yeah, I learned that too late. Yeah. Yep, there is. There most certainly is. So that's a recommendation. Yeah, if you make sure that you know the technologies that you're using in the survey research. Yeah. No, more about their teaching and how they felt in their own educational communities in the school.
So would a policy implication perhaps be something about like communities of practice for people with those?
Yeah, those folks that use that word less or not at all often described collaboration and opportunities to learn with other individuals at their schools. yeah, versus those that were on their own, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a quick question. I may have missed it, but was this for all of K-12? Or I might have missed it in the beginning. I'm sorry if I did. But what grade level did this cover? I know you ended up with a really small N, but I'm just curious who your
K-12.
population was.
Yeah, and that's, if you're gonna get a credential in the state of North Carolina, there's other licenses, but general curriculum license is K-12 for special ed. Yep.
So I'd like to ask a question of where you could give us advice. So you were talking about a challenge of, okay, shortly after you got the grant, lots of your lots of the people left the FI.
Yes.
Right? So your team shrunk. I don't, I wasn't in this position at that point, so I don't know what kind of support you may have gotten. But what would be effective ways that the College of Ed and the Friday Institute could help PIs that find themselves in that position of, I wrote this, we have a short time, amount of time to do it, and now I'm like 3 people down or whatever.
Check-ins maybe, just to see like early on, are you, is this going well? Especially if, people, you have had some attrition, maybe just checking in with PIs and seeing if, can we redirect you to, someone else that might be.
Exactly, allowing a substitution.
Yeah. I will say that, we had 2 doc students who joined us who weren't an original part of the team, and they were instrumental
Yeah.
in helping support the work. So I really
Yeah.
appreciated them.
Yeah, no, I like the idea of just like even like a 2-month check-in of like, okay,
Yeah.
how are things going? Is there anything we can do?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
All right, let's go to presentation number 3.
Which one? The bottom one? The bottom one? The bottom one goes I think that one maybe. Oh, maybe not. I don't know.
Hold on, let me just try it.
Yeah, we can just play around, right?
Or I can just touch the computer.
I can just hit the space bar if that's helpful. We can pretend, you can pretend to click and I'll hit the
Okay,
space bar.
so. Okay, it is the bottom one that goes forward, and then the top one goes back. The bottom.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jima Mojica. I'm a research scholar here at the Friday Institute. I feel very lucky to say, even though we had the smallest team of 3, we worked really closely together, and we were able to work on the things we're going to present as a group. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Sung-Hwan Bian, Assistant Professor in College of Education.
Emily Thrasher. I'm also here at the Friday Institute.
So we just wanted to share that we were really interested in investigating data lessons, and we also wanted to take a look at the types of student participation, and we were particularly interested in seeing if we found what we would describe as equitable student participation. And so our goal for our project that we ended up completing was that we were mainly interested in examining how do middle school teachers and high school teachers, how do they implement data-intensive lessons in their classrooms? So we never defined for these teachers what data-intensive meant. We kind of described that we wanted to come into classrooms to see what they were doing in these lessons. Originally, our goal was that we wanted to observe 10 teachers in their practice. We were only able to get 6. 2 of those were middle school. 4 of those were high school, and that was one of our challenges that we faced. During COVID, it was still very difficult to get into classrooms, so we felt really happy to get 6 at the end. We had wanted to engage teachers in professional development, but Jen had talked about, it took longer through certain phases. So for us, we did not do any professional development with the teachers. We had planned to do that. So we're mainly going to talk about what is it that we saw in their classrooms in terms of related to teaching data. And so what we want to just kind of lay the landscape for is, so what does it mean to teach data-intensive lessons? So we weren't ever expecting to go out to classrooms and see all of these things described up here on the screen. But we just want to share that we don't know a lot about what teachers do, but we know a lot about what statistics education and data science are saying. These are things that we want learners to experience. So if you're in a classroom where you're experiencing engagement with data, when we talk about data being data intensive, we think of students having data that's complex. So complex means bigger cases, more cases, but it also means more attributes or variables. You know, characteristics, different types of attributes are variables. One of our colleagues and friends, Tim Erickson and also Bill Finsner, they talk about you need to be awash in data. So there needs to be so much data, right, that you feel like you have this problem, but the data is very complex. And we also think that this means you should be engaging with real context. So students should have opportunities to solve real problems. Hopefully they are problems that, you know, have a societal impact, but that usually requires engaging with real data, which would mean we're probably interacting with the data in some type of dynamic software. And then also is really important is that visualizations and analysis tools that where you do simple coding or some coding might be required. So my colleague Emily is going to take over and talk a little bit about a process for engaging with data.
You can just, okay. I have 2 slides, so. Hi, everybody. So Gima did a great job of talking about what it means to work with data in K-12, but we also use the data investigation process as another framework to think about what we might see in a data-intensive lesson. And this came out of work from Hollyland, myself, and Gima. And it has 2 big parts. And one is 6 phases that you go through when you work with data well. To start with a problem, get data, process the data, explore it, find trends, find patterns, come up with solutions to your problem and communicate that out. The other part of it is this key considerations and dispositions. And for the sake of the rest of our presentation, I'm going to highlight 3. One of those is the importance of making sense with data with respect to the context. Every time you're working with data, no matter what phase you're in, even when you're in the analysis phase, you want to make sure that you're thinking about what does this mean in terms of the context? What problems does this solve in terms of the context? Other 2 I want to highlight are seek, expertise and information, and communicate and collaborate. It's important when we talk to data scientists, they rarely do work alone. They work in teams. And so a big part of their work is working with others and collaborating and learning more. Part of that is seeking expertise from others that are experts, making sure you understand your context. So, with those 2 frameworks in mind, we, as Gima mentioned, we had 6 teachers that we worked with. And for each of those teachers, we had at least 1 observation in their classroom, which we video recorded and observed. And we have field notes and classroom maps. Some of the other data we got was we interviewed each of those teachers about that lesson or a series of lessons. And then finally, we gave them a practices survey where we learned a little bit more about what they thought it meant to implement data lessons.
All right, so you're gonna get to see some of the data. So this is one of the lessons that one of the participating teacher taught. They're using this data set called MPG data set. So actually we're gonna see a scene with they're talking of the meaning of this placement, which I had no clue before. So we'll get to that. So the next slide, we have actually, did not change. So we're gonna watch. Okay.
There we go, there's the question.
So let me reset that one more time. So we're gonna watch one of the video and then we'll go from there. How do you play?
We're not.
So that was it. Did you see what just happened? So definitely there's a class was talking about this MPG data, what they're talking about, which is data investigation. But the teacher elevated the discussion in a meta level where now can you see what we're just doing as data science doers? So here's the two things I like to highlight. So one thing is that the importance of context, what teacher is emphasizing, which is manifested in real-time classroom interactions. The second thing is the how teacher actually position this particular student here as it's not just that teacher doing, but was also recognized by the peers that as signaled by the handshake that they're doing at the end. So we're very excited to see some of these moves. So next slide, we have interview clip.
Okay. Try that one. Yeah, it doesn't do anything here.
Technology is not really helping us today. Yeah. So anyway, so this is what we heard from interview. Toward the end, the teacher talking about teacher is a mathematics teacher, so talking about difference between teaching data science versus mathematics. And here is the importance of context. So what data earlier we shared with you is that how does it look like in real time? And we're getting a glimpse of what that is and kind of a beginning step of our analysis at this point.
So, I kind of want to skip to this. And I'm going to kind of go out of order, but one of the things that no one asked us yet, but I know Holly Lynn's going to ask us, well, what were some of your challenges? And I think one of the challenges you might be noticing is that we're really excited about working together as a group and about the data that we collected, but it's very challenging sometimes when you have faculty from the college who they're working on a certain time frame, and then you have staff here at the Friday Institute where our time frame of work was very different. And so one of the things that's very exciting is we have all this data that we want to keep digging into, but now we've run out of money, and it's all, somebody's working for free, right? And that's a challenge that all the groups face, but it's just something to think about. So we definitely have done some things to move forward, though. We put in a supplement to the Sept grant. So I think one of the biggest things that we got out of this was building partnerships. So we didn't have any partnerships, and we built some great partnerships as a group. And so we think that some of these partners are going to move forward with us if any of these get funded. But these ideas helped us think about what is it that teachers really need, and how can we build on existing grants that we have, right? Teachers kept telling us we need data sets. We need to work with professionals. So that's where the first idea came from. So that supplement's already been submitted. And then a second proposal that we put in is to work with Braska and to help put out the work that he's doing to give students more data science experiences, but also to go into classrooms and work with more teachers to implement data in their classrooms. And then, so both of those are sitting at NSF. We'll hear from them probably in January, February. And then we are going to disseminate this. It was already accepted, so we're doing a presentation at AMTE. And then we have talked also about some manuscripts that are in preparation that we're interested in submitting. So that's it.
Thank you.
You guys, just because I don't have to answer those questions.
Some questions for this group.
Thank you. So I was thinking back to IRB, because I don't think you mentioned that with this, and I noticed you worked with students and you recorded students. So what advice would you give for getting IRB approved when you're doing that sort of thing?
So it's kind of what Jen was saying. I just wanted to say ditto. So I don't want to make it all about challenges, because I think we have great data and we built some great partnerships. But one of the things that we like to do, because we are focused on student learning as well and student participation and the teacher moves, we like to go in and also collect data where we collect their screen recordings, right? Or we collect data where there's a camera that focuses on the small group as the teacher interacts. Well, because of COVID and because of the length of time it took, we did not ask for any of that data. So we were like Jen's group, where we asked, like, if you want to get this through very quickly, we asked basically, can we take one camera in that's focused on the teacher, right? And then we had to go in, and we had a lot of meetings with very important gatekeepers, where we had to, get these special permissions. The teachers were actually the easiest, right? Like, we were lucky that we had lots of teachers. I don't know if you guys want to add anything else.
State that it took a long time.
It took and it was also during COVID, so that was a challenge.
It
Yeah.
took a lot of time to get that IRB through,
Right.
meet with the people who we needed to meet with, both at
Yes.
state, like
And
IRB, like
at the
Jenny,
schools.
and at the different schools
Right.
and different districts.
Right, and did you have a pre-existing relationship or
No,
partnership
that's what
with
we were
those?
saying. These
Okay,
were all
just-
brand new, yeah.
Yeah.
So everything takes more time.
This is not a question or a comment, just an advertisement. We are having our next Research Cafe October 27th. It's a Thursday at noon with Jenny Offstein to talk about IRB. So I know that's come up a few times. Please join us for that event.
No. So
We're not going to give any more details.
yeah, we're not going to give any more details because we want to be very careful to not identify. So all of the teachers and the schools were in the central part of the state. We were not even pursuing just math. We only did have one that was truly a science teacher, but we had one science teacher. Well, I take that back because the two middle school teachers also taught science, but we observed them in math classes.
The only requirement was that we need to see a data.
A data intense, lesson, and it could be in any subject.
Could you speak a little more to your findings about implementing data lessons and the equitable student participation? Did you dig more into that, or was this just kind of the initial data collection phase?
Jima is talking too much. So, well, that's what she said. All right. So, in terms of analysis, in a preliminary way, we're in terms of the equitable participation part, we haven't gotten there yet. But we are seeing some of the teacher move that could be potentially very leading toward equitable participation, like such as positioning. And I think this will also connect with the earlier presentation where, the context, if the student particular, marginalized identities, students with marginalized identity have expertise in particular context, these kind of moves could position students in a very elevated way that where they will, they'll be able to pursue inquiry in a very with competence. Yeah. So, and still we're looking, we're figuring out how we're going to analyze this.
So I've got a question about, you had made a comment earlier about that you didn't define data intensive for the teachers. Based on, I know you're not done with your analysis, but on a cursory look of the kinds of lessons and the data that they were using in their classroom compared to what you all presented at the beginning of kind of complex data connected to a context, multivariate, those kinds of things, how well do you think your definition of data intensive matched what you were seeing in the classroom?
Well, it definitely varies.
I was going to say, I don't think we have a great answer to that because it varied so much between different classrooms, what we saw. And so because we only had 6 teachers, I'm not sure we can generalize out to say anything broadly. But I will say that classes that define their course as data science probably aligned more closely with what we put up on the screen as being big data and the data investigation process. And classes that were more defined as a statistics lesson, probably less so.
Can I also add, just a caveat to that that I think that related to that is grade levels. So we tended to see the very tidy, small, not messy data sets using graphing calculators at middle school because, that aligns with many of the practices that are there, right? Yeah. And so what I will say that's really hopeful though is I think in all the lessons we observed, even if people were using these very tidy data sets, right, with the graphing calculator, that there were aspects of what we define as data intensive that we saw everywhere, and whether teachers were positioning students in the best way possible to understand data science, I think across teachers were still trying to position students in a positive way. So even the teachers, right, that were teaching the very tidy lessons, they still were trying to involve all students, and they were trying to involve them in the process.
I can say that we focused on context here, and I do think all the lessons we saw did have a focus on context and pulled that back in all the way through their analysis, which is really nice to see.
Any other questions for this group? All right, great, thank you so much. So in general, I would love to hear from anyone in this room as far as your thoughts about the Catalyst program and ways that we can continue to improve it.